Hi everyone, I'm Josh. Welcome back to my channel today. I'm going to be doing a wrap up for my November reads, Nonfiction November. So this time I'm going to try not to forget half the books that I read like I did in October, and hopefully this isn't a hot mess. Let's again, like in previous months, let's start with a book that I did not finish, and I'm actually officially DNFing it, this piece of shit. The Janus Point, A New Theory of Time by Julian Barber. And I hate this is the second time Barber has written a book about an idea, a field that fascinates me, and yet has somehow managed to make me hate it. Time is an amazing thing, and this book is so bad. I don't like it. What the fuck is it? It's an arc that I got, an e-arc that I bought the physical copy of. And I think I finished it like 70%, 65%, so I'm not going to officially count it in the books that I read. But I did read it. I'm reviewing it now. The writing is esoteric. The purpose of the book I don't quite get. Like, it seems to me like he is less concerned with communicating the concept of the Janus Point, and instead proving to the reader why the Janus Point is the most reasonable conclusion from the most esoteric and professional standpoint possible. I don't understand how this could possibly have been written for a lay reader, or the fact that they thought audio was a good choice for a book of this level. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving it too much hate. It has 3 stars on Goodreads. I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way. At least that feels negatively towards it generally. But this feels less well written than his other book. I didn't love his other book either. I just feel like he doesn't know how to properly communicate to the average reader. He needs to be better focused in his narrative in a way that's able to help the reader understand what he's talking about and recognize, in my opinion, from a scientist's perspective, what is appropriate for the audience you're talking to. This is not a paper. Maybe that is his purpose. Maybe I'm wrong to assume that this is what he's trying to do. But if you're trying to communicate this to the average reader, to the populace, whatever you call it, you need to just think about what level of understanding we can get to and what's necessary. And if you want to go more detailed, at least start with a base. And I don't think he does that. And I'm so disappointed. Honestly, if you're interested in time and the potential idea of the Janus Point, which is this idea, by the way, I guess we're going to get into it, that at the Big Bang, here's everything starting forward in time. There is on the other side within space-time, everything sort of extends in the opposite direction as well, except the same way we see matter evolve forward, what we consider forward in time, in the positive direction of space-time, there is in the opposite direction at the Janus Point, or the Big Bang, basically, a similar thing going on where matter is evolving in a way that looks like forward in time, but in the opposite direction of space-time. And it gives the illusion of having 2 directions of time, but really it's just all of matter evolving as we understand it. Just the perspective is like a different. Like if we're driving a car, our car is going this way, the other car is going that way. Both cars are going forward, but obviously to us, the other car is going backwards. That idea is interesting on the face of it, I think, and I just wish he did a better job of explaining why he got there. I think if you're interested in things like that, I've already packed those books, but the From Eternity to Here by Sean Carroll talks about time and the point of entropy and really helps understand why it is that we can perceive time going in one direction or the other. But he also talks about in there the idea of a potential way in which the universe could have come about, where basically the Big Bang is not the origin of our universe, but the origin of the universe as we know it, as the laws as we know it, the configuration of space and time has just evolved slightly. And it's a similar idea to what's in here. I know that because I contacted Sean Carroll on his podcast, asked him basically what he thought of this book, how it relates to his book, and he basically said that. He said it's a similar idea, different direction, different motivation behind it, but that's the gist of it. I think the basic idea is really interesting. I know I should have started with the most complicated book, but basic idea that maybe the Big Bang isn't the origin of all of existence, just the origin of the existence as we know it, is an interesting, compelling idea from a naturalist perspective. That actually was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be to review. What comes next? Before we get to the physical ones, I don't want to forget, I have 3 arcs that I read. That was technically an arc too, so let's start with Being You, which is a book on consciousness. And this was, what did I give it? I don't remember. I think 4 stars probably seems reasonable at this point. It's a book that talks about consciousness. It seems to be spending less time talking about consciousness and more about the way the brain works, the way brains work in general, which I guess does relate back to consciousness. I don't want to seem disappointed because I think this is a book worth reading. I just feel like there was more stuff that had heard about prior to this than I was expecting. Because when we talk about the way the brain works, that kind of relates to skepticism, which again, I don't have the books up here, but the way we can trick ourselves and the cognitive behavior. It all was a really fascinating conversation. Some of it was new, some of it wasn't. My favorite thing about the book, I think, was the idea of time and how we perceive time, and how we get this feeling how if you're in a boring situation, it feels like time is going slow. That perception, that idea, I always just imagine was just in our heads, which technically it is, but it also seems to be a consistent and measurable phenomenon where the way we work as humans, we interpret time, at least retrospectively, as having flowed faster if there are more inputs, more things going on around us. This has been replicated, or at least tested in laboratory scenario. You can read the book if you're interested in knowing more details, but I just thought it was fascinating. I also love it just because I think it fits well into my perspective of the way existence works, which is the idea of the block universe, or the idea of you have space and you have time and you have matter revolving through space-time, and all points in time are equally real. So the idea of why we perceive time flowing is just how our brains interpret reality. And I think that perception, that understanding of consciousness fits well into that. But I'm reaching, to be fair. And I just want an excuse to talk about time in the block universe. Let's get on, because I feel like I have to be losing viewers at this point. No, still two more. Let's go with Raising Them. This is a memoir about a non-binary femme who is queer and talks about their experience raising their child as non-binary, which is to say, not attributing gender to them until they are old enough to tell them what their gender is. I was disappointed in this book. I think I gave it 3.5 because I was expecting a how-to guide, and it felt more like a personal experience. This was different than what I was expecting. It's interesting. There were parts of it that I kind of cringed at, not because I didn't think the idea was intriguing, but because of, separate from the concept of gender, but when you get talking about things that I have problems with, things like homeopathy, aromatherapy, bullshit, stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily relate to the basic idea of the book, but it's still ingrained in there, this sort of way of thinking that I just can't help but get uncomfortable with. I have a hard time saying I liked this book as a person's perspective when that is an integral part of it. But I wouldn't say it's that major, but it's there, and I think it's really got into my skin. I don't know. What I think is that I was expecting or planning to buy this book for my sister, who has a young child, and my other sister, who I think wants a child eventually, and I come to the conclusion that I'm not going to do that because I don't think it would make a good. I don't think it would make a good book to try and persuade them with. I wish it was. The problem is I feel like the book is unnecessary. That sounds terrible. The book is totally necessary, as much as any memoir is. I'm trying to say it's not necessary to have that conversation about raising a child without the gender stereotypes and the benefits therein. That conversation, I feel like could be had with somebody just as well instead of giving this book. I think the book is fascinating and it's all right. When it comes to whether or not it'd make a good how-to guide, whether it make a good book to convince people with, I don't think so. I don't know if that was the purpose. It was something I was expecting it to be, so it was a little disappointing from my own false expectations. Still a good book, 3.5 to 4. I feel like I'm shitting on the book, and I did like it, so let's just get on before I keep being so awkward about it. Okay, one more book that was looking at the back of my mind. Yes, I just finished it. How did I forget this? One Beat at a Time by Barbara Little Thunder, I believe. A two-spirit queer lesbian indigenous woman who was telling her life story through oral communication. Basically, she articulated it orally to a writer, and the writer then put it to page. And I was listening to the audiobook of the writer narrating it herself. The point is, it was just her memoir. And I originally wanted to read this. Actually, I got this as an arc a year ago, and I almost didn't get to it this month, but I made a point to get to it because I was disappointed that I hadn't gotten to an Indigenous work in a month dedicated to recognizing Indigenous peoples. So I did that, and I got through it. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I think 4 stars. I had a lot of complex feelings about this book, similar to Raising Them. From one perspective, it was fascinating, very, very fascinating and enlightening. to read and hear this person's perspective, rather. I think it's very valuable and worth getting to. But at the core, I found myself disagreeing with some of her fundamental views on life, which, okay, who gives a fuck, right? Nobody cares, right? The book wasn't written to please me. It wasn't written to convince me of this. There's feelings I had that sort of were different people, different cultures, and that's the whole point of reading it. And while I may not have agreed with all of her perspectives in life, some of her life choices, I very much appreciate her sharing that story and the ability to hear it. There are a lot of ways I was able to empathize, and other ways it was like looking through a window. You know, the windows and mirrors. There was a bit of both in here, which I think is always important to think about that kind of thing when you approach these kind of books, to ask what you can learn about someone else and also learn about yourself through them. At least that's how I approach these kind of books, or books in general, memoirs or nonfiction books that I'm trying to get to from a learning perspective. So overall, a fine book, a good book, one that I think is worth reading. I'll leave it at that. I have a habit of rambling, which is evident by the 15 minutes I've spent on 3 books. What comes next? The last book I read of the month. And I don't know what I want to give this book. Galileos Daughter, a historical memoir of science, faith, and love by David Sobel. I thought this book was going to be more about his daughter than actual Galileo, and it wasn't. It was really about Galileo. The daughter thing was really just sort of a selling point. I'm not sure. She is a perspective we get. Her relationship with him is one perspective we get, but it's minor, and it's fundamentally about Galileo's life. Now, what I will say is it is fantastically written. This book is between 4 and 4.5 stars, I think. It was really well written, really great look at Galileo's life. David Sobel has a way of just crafting a really compelling story. And honestly, I think this might be her best work that I've read yet. This one is one of her most popular ones, and I can understand why that is, because it's really well written. If you're ever curious about the life of Galileo, I think this is a great memoir, a great autobiography or biography to consider picking up. I wouldn't say it's your traditional biography, but it is fundamentally a biography about him with a slight perspective or look at his daughters as well, or at least there was one daughter who became a nun because she was, I think, born out of wedlock or something. But a really good book, really fun, fascinating book. I think it changed the way I saw Galileo. I guess we'll keep getting into it. We get a look at his trial, why he was on trial, his defense, and I did learn more than I thought I knew beforehand. And his arguments as to why he wasn't challenging the church, honestly, I believed him, but the problem was the arguments were really dumb, which made me question his intelligence to a bit. But at the same time, he is a product of his time. We all are products of our time. And cognitive dissonance works wonders on our brains. I understand. Great book, though. Honestly, 4 to 4, I think it's 4.5 to 5. I don't know. I'll decide later. But I highly recommend it. Here we go with Hattie McDaniel, Black Ambition and White Hollywood, by Jill Watts. This was a phenomenal book. 4.5 to 5 stars. I did a live show about this with Bree from Lock Petition, so I highly recommend you check that out. It's an autobiography of her life, but also a biography of the state of Hollywood, the history of Hollywood in this time as well. Ooh, okay, this one, What is Life? By Ewan Schrodinger, and I gave this 3 stars. I was expecting this to be more astrobiologically focused. It was more broad than that. I feel like it was a physicist's take on biology and life on a fundamental level, and it was very broad and in some ways esoteric, but not quite as bad as the Janus Point. I think I was not in the right headspace for this. I considered stopping earlier on, but I thought if I tried harder I could focus better and retain it. But then by the time I was done, I realized I didn't retain much. I really want to reread this because I think there was a lot we've learned from this book, and I don't think I did a very good job. I'm kind of hesitant to say I actually read this because I feel like I shouldn't have forgotten all of it by this point. It's just, it is a lot to take in. I guess just wasn't in the right headspace, and I should have recognized that. Interesting book from what I did get from it. Interesting enough for me to know that I need to read it again to really appreciate it, is the point I'm trying to make. I wouldn't say it's an easy read, though. If you're interested in reading it, just know that going in. And finally, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. I think I pronounced that wrong. Medicine and What Matters in the End. I read this at the beginning of November. I think I started it while I was in Washington, D.C. Can't believe that was this last month. There's a vlog of that should be coming. I just haven't had any time to edit it. I doubt it'll get edited before this video, but I promise I'm going to try to get it done. God, I have so much to do. I probably won't get it done. But anyways, great book. I was on the verge of crying multiple times. This book is about mortality and about his journey, this doctor's, surgeon's journey in coming to appreciate the value of quality of life towards the end. And we have a system that is built around extending life, on maximizing the quantity of life and not appreciating the value of quality of life. It should be up to the individual to decide what it is that matters more to them, a longer life or quality of life in the end. Because a lot of the ways in which we try and give longer life oftentimes shortens life while also ruining quality of life in this process. And a very compelling book for that matter. Highly recommend. What did I give this? Let's just say 5 stars. What more is there to say? That's all there is to say. So this is Christmas and a happy new year. That's not right. I don't know. We're here. It's December. My December TBR either went before this or we'll go after it. I don't know yet. Maybe it won't go up at all. We'll see what happens. The magical world of having video that's not edited. That's most of what I make. So, as always, thanks so much for watching. If you made it to the end, why don't you give me a stack of books? Just because, I don't know, I'm lazy. And as always, have a great day, stay safe, and I'll see you all next time, okay? Good day. Good day.